Hello, my name is Kat, and today I'm going to be talking about my chosen author, Anne Bradstreet. Anne Bradstreet was born in 1612, had 8 children, and had a husband named Simon who governed the Massachusetts Bay during the time period. I chose Anne because she was a well-educated woman, Puritan during the 17th century, and I think that's pretty cool. She was well-educated because of the opportunities her wealthy family had. For example, her dad had an entire library just at Anne's disposal. This library helped to build her intellectual abilities by helping her read, helping her ability to write, and just overall building her communicative skills, which is later seen in her poems. It wasn't really a thing for men to support intellectual abilities seen with inside women because they were meant to tend to houses, clean things, bear children, very motherhood things. They weren't meant to be intellectual because that was the men's job, not the woman's. Her and her family later on migrated from Europe to America in the 1630s. 20 years later, her brother-in-law also showed his support through Anne by taking these pieces of her writing that she took with her and taking them back to Europe and publicizing them there in the 1650s. He did this to show, it wasn't a jab, he did this to show that intellectual women, like Anne herself, are not a threat to men, but they're good for the overall functionality of society. He did this to show that well-educated and well-rounded women actually tend to be better mothers, better caregivers, better housewarmers, that they're overall better in general than one that isn't well-educated. And this later on was called the 10th Muse Sprung in America. 10th Muse Sprung in America was just a mixture of all of Anne's beliefs with religion, her family, her relationships, her personal struggles, and all of these really shone through in her other poems as well. She later on goes to write My Soul Rejoice. And in this specific poem, it really highlights her religion with God as she is a Puritan. In this poem, she talks about how she understands that just as God gives her the graces that he does, he takes them away from her. He talks about how Anne understands all of these things with religion and how she's really developed in her intellectual abilities, and this is also seen in a lot of her other poems, such as My Dear and Loving Husband. In My Dear and Loving Husband, she talks about her relationship with her husband. Her husband is seen as better than other men in her eyes. She thinks in this poem that her and her husband are not two, they are one. They are one soul united by God. She writes a lot of poems about God, and every single one of her poems tend to have something about religion in them, and this is what a lot of people have referred to as a religious blanket. It's whenever someone finds comfort in their religion. So Anne always talks about her religion. Whether it deals with relationships, whether it deals with her personal struggles, she always brings religion into it because she feels like it is always the end answer. This is seen in 10th Muse Sprung Up in America, this is seen in My Soul Rejoice, this is seen in My Dear and Loving Husband, and this is also seen in one of the hardest poems that people believe that she's ever written. It's called Verses of Our House Burning Down, and in this poem, she realizes that there's fire all around her when she wakes up. She sees flames, she feels like there's nothing she can do about it, and this is seen towards the middle. She begins to talk about how she feels helpless, how she doesn't know what to do, about how she sees all of her materials being burnt and how she knows she can't save them. But towards the end of this poem, once again, she brings up her religion and she starts to speak to God and say how she understands that these material things were holding her back, how these materials had nothing to do with her life and how it should not affect her because she knows that what's above is better than what's below. And she says this in one of her last verses. In My Soul Rejoice, she also talks about materialistic things. She says things like, farewell to my pleth. She's referring to her materialistic items and how she's getting rid of them and only bringing items in that help support her religion and help her to find peace in who she really is. She writes a lot about her hardships, and she undergoes a lot more that she hasn't written about. One of the things that she very, very rarely written about was her immigration. Now, as I've previously stated, she immigrated from Europe in 1630s to America. During this immigration, she underwent a lot of stress because she was only 18 at the time. At this time, a woman's frontal lobe hasn't developed, and she had already been married since she was 16. She's undergoing a lot of stress as it already is. And during this immigration, it didn't help because of weather and because of deaths. The weather caused the deaths, but both have a severe impact on her. For example, the rain, the crashing of the waves, the thunder, the lightning. These are all things that Anne had a hard time with, and they really, really stressed her out. And because of the weather, this caused disease. The wet, the cold, the hot, all of it caused disease, and these caused passings. People that she grew up with, people that she understood, people that shared a God with her, she watched them pass away in front of her when there's nothing she could do. This hardship alone caused so many issues for her, but she also suffered from other things like smallpox, which she had twice, and tuberculosis. She actually eventually passed away from tuberculosis around the 1670s, but her life didn't just stop there. It continued around the 20th century because of women. And you may say, well, Anne's not that important because I don't know about her. She isn't that important. She isn't that popular. She wasn't popular yet. See, yes, she made the achievement of being America's first woman poet, to have a first publicized piece in America. Those are all great achievements, but they didn't mean anything because the men didn't care. The men did not care that much. Yes, it's a great achievement now, but it wasn't seen as what it was meant to be seen as during the time period. It didn't start until the 20th century because things like femininity, feminism, they all rose. There was a trend in feminism, and women started to idolize other women, put people in leader positions, and because of this, they started looking for other leaders that were women. And after doing research from the past, they found Anne Bradstreet. They found Anne's poems, they found her relationships and her godly transitions in these poems, and they realized that she was a perfect woman role model. And because of this, she started gaining popularity in the 20th century, and she was referred to as America's first feminist. Overall, Anne had a severe impact on her life, on everyone's life. She was the first American woman publication in America. She had publications in Europe, 1650s. She talked about her hardships, her love life, her relationship with the Lord. There's so many things that goes into her life, and all of these things are still present in America today. Thank you.